The rain didn't just fall that night, it wept. It poured like the sky itself was mourning something lost. Inside a small, dimly lit diner on the outskirts of Portland, a girl stood by the counter, her trembling fingers gripping a coffee pot. Her name was Lila Moore, and though she looked no older than 24, her eyes carried the weight of someone who had lived through 1,000 storms. She kept her hair tied in a messy knot that always hung low, and a thin scarf wrapped around her face covering one side like a veil. Few had ever seen what lay beneath it. The ones who did never forgot. Once, Lila had been radiant, the kind of beauty that made people turn and smile without knowing why. But that was before the accident, before the crash that took her mother's life, left her scarred, and shattered everything she had known. Now she lived quietly, moving through her days like a shadow, afraid of mirrors, afraid of light, and most of all, afraid of being seen. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of love that heals the unseen scars, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Let's spread hope, one story at a time. The diner was her world now. Every morning, Lila tied her apron, poured coffee, smiled softly behind the scarf, and avoided eye contact. She was polite, careful, and invisible. Most customers never looked twice. They came and went, leaving tips and whispers, pretending not to wonder why the waitress hid her face. But then one cold November evening, a man walked in who didn't look away. He was tall, maybe in his early 30s, with a clean but tired look, like someone who worked hard, not for money, but to forget something. His name was Ethan Cole, a former photographer who had once captured beauty for a living, but hadn't lifted a camera in years. He ordered black coffee, sat by the window, and stared at the rain like it was trying to tell him something. When Lila approached with his order, she accidentally spilled a few drops on his table. Mortified, she apologized quickly, her voice small and shaking. Ethan looked up, and for a moment he saw what others didn't. He saw pain, not the kind written on skin, but the kind carved deep in the soul. Days passed. Ethan kept coming back, always at the same table, always at the same hour. Sometimes he'd bring his sketchbook, sometimes nothing at all. He watched the way Lila moved, quietly, gracefully, like she was afraid to take up space. And though she never removed her scarf, he noticed the kindness in her eyes, the way she spoke gently to elderly customers, and how she always smiled at children, even when they asked curious questions about her face. He never asked, not once. Winter deepened. The world outside froze, but something small and warm began to thaw between them. Ethan would leave small notes on napkins, little sketches of flowers or sunrises, nothing romantic, just hopeful. Lila began to look forward to those notes. They reminded her that beauty still existed, even in things broken and incomplete. But fate has a way of testing those who begin to hope again. One afternoon, a group of young men walked into the diner, laughing too loud, acting too confident. They had been drinking, and when they saw Lila, one of them made a cruel joke about her scarf. Another snickered and said she must be hiding a monster's face. The laughter stung like knives. Lila froze, clutching the tray, her body shaking as the room went quiet. Before she could run, Ethan stood up. He didn't yell, didn't threaten. He simply walked over, took the tray from her trembling hands, and looked those men in the eyes with a calm so cold it silenced them. "That's enough," he said softly, and though his voice was gentle, there was steel beneath it. The men muttered and left, shame following them like shadows. That night, when the diner closed, Lila sat alone in the back room, crying quietly. Years of pain poured out in that single moment, the fear, the shame, the loneliness. Ethan waited outside until she came out. He didn't try to comfort her with words. Instead, he handed her a folded paper. Inside was a sketch, her silhouette pouring coffee, sunlight streaming through the window behind her, and underneath it, he had written one sentence. "You are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Lila broke. But it wasn't the kind of breaking that destroys. It was the kind that begins to rebuild. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, she began to speak to him more. He told her about his past, how he had lost his wife in a fire 5 years ago, and how he hadn't taken a photograph since. She told him about the accident, the car, the glass, the flames, and the scar that stole her confidence. They both carried burns, just in different places. One day, Ethan brought his old camera to the diner. "I want to show you something," he said. Lila shook her head instantly, panic rising in her throat. "No pictures?" she whispered. "Not of me." He nodded. "All right, then I'll just take pictures of everything you love." And he did. The coffee cups, the rain on the window, the cat that always slept by the door, the old man who came in for soup every evening. Through his lens, he captured her world, the quiet one she had built out of brokenness. Then one evening, as the sun dipped low, he showed her the prints. "They're beautiful," she whispered. "They are," he said, "because they see the world the way you do." It was that moment she realized. He wasn't trying to make her feel seen. He was teaching her how to see herself again. Spring came. The scarf remained. But the way she wore it changed. It wasn't hiding her anymore. It was simply a part of her story. One morning, Ethan asked her to come outside. They stood behind the diner, near a wall of wildflowers that had begun to bloom. He took a deep breath. "Lila, I want to take one picture. Just one. Not for the world. Just for you." She hesitated. Her heart pounded. Then, trembling, she nodded. He lifted the camera slowly. Lila reached up and unwrapped the scarf. The cool air brushed against her skin, and for the first time in years, she didn't flinch. The scar ran down the right side of her cheek, a map of pain and survival. But Ethan didn't look shocked. He just smiled softly, tears filling his eyes. "Perfect," he whispered. Click. That single photograph changed everything. Ethan never shared it. It wasn't meant for anyone else. But when Lila saw it, the way the sunlight touched her face, the quiet strength in her eyes, she finally saw what Ethan had seen all along. Beauty, not despite the scars, but because of them. A few months later, the diner owner retired and offered Lila the place. She hesitated, unsure she could manage it alone. But Ethan helped her, repainting the walls, setting up a small corner where he hung his photos. Together, they turned the old diner into something new, the Second Chance Café. People came not just for coffee, but for comfort, for kindness, for the feeling that maybe, just maybe, broken things could still be beautiful. And one day, as a little girl with a birthmark on her cheek came in, hiding behind her mother, Lila knelt down, smiled, and said softly, "You're beautiful, sweetheart." The little girl smiled back, and in that moment, the circle of healing continued. Ethan still came every morning, still sat by the window, sketching or reading. Sometimes when the sun caught Lila's face just right, she'd laugh and tease him, asking if he was still trying to find the perfect picture. He'd smile and say, "I already have. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Let's remind the world that kindness can heal what pain has broken." Before you go, tell us in the comments, have you ever met someone who helped you see your own worth again? Because sometimes the most beautiful love stories aren't about perfection. They're about two broken souls who find the courage to see beauty in each other's scars. And that's exactly what Lila and Ethan did. They didn't fall in love overnight. They grew into it, like flowers through cracks in the pavement, defying everything that said they shouldn't. And maybe that's what true beauty really is. Not what the world sees, but what remains when everything else is stripped away.